Hello, everyone. Um, Thank you so much for being here today at Lipedema Wellness Conversations with Gail. That would be me. And friends, that would be Jill Harvey with us today. Thank you so much for your patience. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty where I didn't quite know how to tell time anyway. But I noticed that several of our ladies and our viewers got online and sent us messages, and we really appreciate that. And I hope that you hung out and waited for me and waited for Jill. So the purpose of this conversation today is to introduce you to Jillian Harvey. She is from Melbourne, Australia, and she is one of our coaches at Lipedema Simplified. And it has been an amazing year. She's been with us for about a year, maybe a little over. It's been an amazing year. She has facilitated some of the CSIGs that we've done. She has worked with us with the Coaches Corners. She has a big part in teaching all of us a little bit more about nutrition. I shouldn't say a little bit, a lot more about nutrition. She talks about histamine reaction. She talks about food sensitivities. And she has a very interesting journey. So I'd like to introduce you tonight to Jill Harvey from tomorrow morning in Melbourne, Australia. Hi, Jill.
Hi, and yeah, you're correct. I'm saying hello from the future. It's just after 9 in the morning here, so that's always the joy of our lives, is telling time zones across the entire world. Anyway, so it's great to be here, and it's been wonderful being part of the Lipedema Simplified community, and I think that's exactly it for us, isn't it? That it is community, and community is such a strong thread and theme through everything we do, which is just wonderful.
Yeah, and you're right. Community is everything. And as I look at the names that are popping up here in the chat, I see Marilee from Washington and Julie from California. I see Catherine from Boston, and then Linda Mendenhall is here. She is from Camden, Alabama. And let's see who else is here. Lisa is here, and she says hi. Welcome, Jill. And so, Jill, I presented that you have an interesting journey, and from all the stories that you've told me, I didn't realize it until just recently that you haven't been a nutritionist all your adult life. So how did you get started in the field of nutrition?
That's true. And I think both the personal and professional journey track very closely with each other. So I had been a sickly child, the kid that's always got something, always. And it was interesting. As a child, I always had chest infections, including I had 2 rounds of pneumonia, which has left me probably permanently scarred with bronchiectasis. So that's a lifelong vulnerability there. As an adult, I had chronic sinusitis. And it was interesting because my GP would go, oh, come in and, block one nostril off. Can you breathe? Yes. Block the other one. Can you breathe? Yes. I said, it's still not right. And so we do a CAT scan, I think. There's only so many CAT scans you're allowed to have of your head, and you go, oh, you had a CAT scan 2 years ago. So we got to the point where it was like, what do they call it? Bilateral pansinusitis. Every cavity in my head was filled with goop all the time. And, as part of that cycle of just having nonstop respiratory conditions, and you can see how in the current climate, it sets up a risk factor. I was on antibiotics nonstop. It was always congested, then it would get infected, then there's antibiotics, because when it's in such a fine part of the body, not a lot you can do to get it out. And then I was really and since then I've actually heard of a concept called immunosenescence, which is something which we associate with very late life. Like it's that last little thing that takes a very frail and elderly person on their final journey. But the interesting thing we're seeing now is that people younger and younger have got immune systems that are just not coping with, and when we say environmental impacts, that includes food. It's stuff from the outside world that gets inside our bodies. So this is endocrine disrupting chemicals, which our personal care products are full of. So, it's all these layers of things where you think you're living a normal life and you're applying things to your own body, both through personal care products and the environment and food, which your body treats as toxic. So I was lucky. I found a GP. Here we would call them an integrative GP, but I think also other phrases would be functional or holistic. And he said this antibiotics. And of course, it was the chemical warfare where I needed more and more to have more of an effect, and ended up on some very, very strong ones. And of course, that really punishes your microbiome, which is such a critical part of your immune system. So we had a whole lot of therapy, including IV supplements. So this is mega dose. This is quantities of vitamin nutrients that you just can't take orally because your digestive tract won't cooperate with that sort of quantity. And that was fascinating. And also we did a lot of work with food. And probably around this time, I discovered paleo. And in Australia, I've had discussions with people in other countries, and paleo can be perceived differently. But in Australia, a very big part of paleo is the clean eating part. So with a preference for organic. And that was really beneficial in terms of, reducing that level of chemical confrontation that my body was having to face on a daily basis. So, and I found, I guess for me, it was absolutely stunning to discover just what an impact that food can have. And I think a syndrome that is such a picture of the modern nutrition status for so many people is that we're actually overfed energy. So that will predispose us to weight gain. And there's another whole element with that with lipedema. And we're underfed nutrients. So this is vitamins, minerals, and some of the other they're tiny. So the macro and the micro, too much energy, not enough nutrients. And so this was an absolute revelation. I've been waiting for my next step, just sort of waiting. And there's a lot of teachers in my family, and you'll appreciate that, Gail. And people said, oh, go and do teaching. I was like, yeah, I think you need a fire in your belly for teaching. It's a calling to spend your day with kids. Bless their hearts. They're wonderful, but they're challenging. And I didn't have that fire in my belly. And I did a bit of, what do they call it? I guess occupational testing, that type of thing. And they said teaching adults. And I thought, how am I going to get to do that? What do I get to be an expert to teach adults in? But this is really the path I found. And after my own personal experience of finding out, just how powerful food is, what a difference it can make to our body and our lives, I thought, this is it. I had the fire in my belly, and this is lifelong for me. So, and look, there are so many people in need of just accessing good advice and good learning. And really, I consider that I'm here as a conduit for information. It's all out there. We know that there's no problem with the quantity of information out there. I think really it's quality and connecting with the information that's can help a person start a new journey which is right for them. We've all got a different path, and it's having that thing to analyze and set a person on the path that's going to work the best for them. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're right. There's kind of a fire in your belly when you get ready to teach. It's like when you find that subject, that content, that, oh, this makes sense. This is going to have an impact. This has impact on my own life, and I can share it. And I truly believe that coaches, teachers, facilitators, they all have that same fire in their belly. They want to share. They want to share. They want to lead people in a particular direction. And I know for me personally, when I'm a math teacher by trade. I guess that's, or training. I guess that's how I look at myself. And yet I probably make more math problems than I make more math problems than I solve. How's that? But what happened with me is when I found out that I had lipedema, I became passionate about that. And I know for you found out about lipedema before because you were already a nutritionist.
I was.
When you found out about lipedema, you had already been living your life as a nutritionist before you found out about lipedema. Where I found out about lipedema and turned toward nutrition, you were already dealing with nutrition. So tell me about your journey with lipedema and how you discovered your niche with Lipedema Simplified.
Well, it was interesting because I very much came into the community through being either a low carb accredited or a keto nutritionist. And I think it's really powerful for so many people across the population because metabolic health underlies so many of our modern lifestyle diseases. It's interesting, we use this phrase quite blithely, NCDs, top 5 killers in Australia, probably top 5 killers in the US, even still with this rampant infection ripping through the world over the last couple of years. NCDs, non-communicable diseases, things we can't catch from each other, are still huge. And it's interesting because I always, in Australia, we didn't have big case numbers with, as I call it, the Rona, for a long time. And yet 44 people were dying every day from diabetes. And I'm not sure if that even included complications from diabetes. So for a long time, diabetes deaths in Australia was still outstripping COVID deaths. People say, but we don't need to deal with diabetes like we deal with COVID because you can't catch it. But I do wonder if, in a way, the fact that we live in an obesogenic food environment where, and this is a theme I talk about a lot, is that in order to make changes to our body, our food, our habits, we actually have to swim against the tide. We have to reject a lot of that stuff, heavily processed foods in packets in the center aisles of the supermarket. So, it's sort of catching from an environmental perspective because we're just in there. And if we take the default offering, it's probably the pathway that is more than likely eventually going to happen to us. So that was it, metabolic health. I'll always be passionate about that. And it's fascinating in lipedema of that the difference with a metabolic adiposity picture is what we call central adiposity, or the good old belly fat, which is associated far more with, they would call it android, as in androgenic, a male fat distribution. Though there are women who have this fat distribution. We notice with lipedema that it's very much about and that central adiposity is visceral. So this is fat around organs. There's no surgical way of taking that away. We've got to do the hard yards and actually burn that fat to get rid of it. But what we see is a very different picture with lipedema is that it's much more, as we call, a gynoid pattern, that classic hips, thighs, legs. And it's also subcutaneous fat rather than visceral fat. So it doesn't have quite the same. It actually has a lower risk profile. We see that some women end up with diabetes, but for a lot of women with lipedema, this ability, we'll call it an ability to lay down fat. It's like, yay, that's my talent. I don't think very few of us are pleased about that. It can be, yeah, it can be protective of metabolic disease. And we see that where, you know, sisters, one will have lipedema and the other will have diabetes. But, you know, it's so fascinating. So I came to that, and it was, this has been, and I think this is a picture, is it's about lifelong learning. We never stop, you know, and anyone who says, oh, the science is settled, it's all like, really? You know, we were still, the last frontal lobotomies were being conducted in the mid-60s. You know, so I think if they'd said the science has said, oh, this is the way to deal with mental health, and we were still doing lobotomies, we'd be horrified. We've got to keep evolving. So, you know, my learning, and I've learned so much from the lipedema community, and, you know, because I came from very much the nutrition picture, a lot of my learning has been about the other complementary therapies, like, you know, compression, MLD massage, dry skin brushing, you know, moving. I was so pleased as a water-loving person that, you know, being active in water is so supportive and so beneficial for women with lipedema. And then I started looking at things and going, and then vibration plate too, which I just recently got my own one, and it's been fabulous. So I'd look at these therapies, and, you know, there's nothing like a bit of, you know, there's a long history in science of self-experimentation. I can't find anyone to do this experiment. I'll do it on myself. And the interesting thing is I found that so many of these complementary therapies or conservative measures were so beneficial for me. It's like, oh, you know, I don't present as a classical lipedema body shape, although probably not the most svelte legs in the universe. But, you know, like skinny jeans, like I remember going shopping for clothes, and they said, oh, these are the skinny jeans and these are the easy fits. And I'm going, there's no difference. They look the same. And in, you know, boot buying, you know, so, and then I thought, you know, this is interesting. Wonder. And then I had a remedial massage, and my massage therapist said, oh, you've got all this fibrotic tissue down the back of your thighs, and it sort of feels like beans. And I went, oh, I've heard about that before. This is something that women with lipedema have. And it really got me thinking then. And I thought, wow, all these, you know, complementary therapies, this bean-like tissue in my thighs. So luckily in Melbourne, we do have a clinic where there are physiotherapists who've got very in-depth knowledge. And I went there and she goes, yeah, you have lipedemic tissue in your legs. And I have it right up here near my armpits. And I have the bingo wings too. Yay. You know, yep. I've got to sort you sorted your arm compression. I've got to sort my arm compression too. So just doing a bit of shopping. Yeah. So there we go. I learned from the lipedema. And so how does this flag to us, you know, the lack of awareness that I could come in here, work with the community for almost a year, and then have a diagnosis? How many women are walking around there we know so many women are walking around without a diagnosis or a late diagnosis where, you know, unfortunately it is progressive and they're only getting the diagnosis when things have really progressed for them because they haven't had the tools to support their own body.
Right. Because most of the time we're told we're obese, or we're told eat less and move more. And like you're extraordinarily active. I mean, you're an athlete. And
I love that. It's a different picture to the one I have in my head.
In my book, you're an athlete. You swim.
Yeah.
Right? You do a lot of water sports. In my book, that's an athlete. I mean, you're not sedentary. from everything that I've
No.
understood. You're not sedentary, and you've been eating for your health. Like you say, you started out with paleo, and because for other health issues, you changed the way you ate. And even still, with those changes, you're like, wait a minute, I've got these same issues. And so everything that you were doing was right for not knowing you had lipedema. And those of us who aren't necessarily that type of active, and who are not necessarily, we didn't have a medical purpose for eating a particular way.
Mm.
We couldn't stop the weight from packing on. Like you say, we lay on weight. It just lays on. Oh, here's another layer. Here's another layer. Here's another layer.
Yeah, have some more fat.
I mean, I've been dieting since I was 11. Now, that doesn't mean I've dieted continuously, but I do know people who have watched every bite they put in their mouth continuously for decades, right? I mean, they've been dedicated, and then it's like something happens and they can't stop it. And I remember a few years ago, before I start, I mean, I've been on October 4th is going to be my Keto Bursary, my 5-year Keto Bursary. And I remember before that, I would tell my husband, I don't know what to do. Every time I get on the scale, I'm 1 or 2 pounds heavier, and I'm working as hard as I can. I couldn't lose weight. I didn't have the skills. I didn't have the understanding of what my body needed, because I was going with either lower calorie or all whole grains and those sorts of things. And I remember I was on a juice diet for 6 months and I put on 20 pounds. Well, it was because I was drinking sugar.
No. Sugar water.
Sugar water.
Yep.
Sugar. It was like liquid fruit going into me, right? But it was supposed to be the healthy way of doing it. And so I didn't have that knowledge. And even I'm wondering, even if I had the knowledge, even if I had a coach to help me, would have I been able to break the old way of thinking? Because like I said, I've been dieting since I was 11 and I'm 62. So when I turned 50, I was dieting for, 40 years, a little bit off on the math there, but close to 40 years. How would I be able to break that? Because I'd been doing the same thing over and over again. Even if I had a coach, I wonder if I would have been able to break it. Because I remember somebody said to me, I think I was trying to join Curves or something. And they're like, if there was one food that you would never want to give up in your entire life, what would that food be? And I said, bananas. I could never give up a banana. I eat them every day. And they said, well, unless you make a change, changes aren't going to happen. I'm like, I don't care. I don't care if I have to make it. I'm not making that change. I'm not giving up bananas. And I haven't had a banana in 5 years, and I don't miss them a bit. But,
and they're so mucus producing from a former. So for me, this is the difference. I was probably having about 10 rounds of antibiotics or 10 courses of antibiotics per year. And I think I've been low carb for over 10 years now. And I think I've had sinusitis that required antibiotics once in that time.
Oh,
and
wow.
Then I know when I had COVID, it went to my sinuses, but did I need antibiotics? No, I think I got away without having another round of antibiotics. So sinus gets you where you're weak, though. Like, it just went, everyone's got like, oh, I've got this cough, I've got all the rest. I'm like, no, it's in my sinuses.
Right.
But yeah, and better that than in my lungs, though.
Right. Oh yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I had chronic UTIs, 3-4 a year.
That loves sugar.
Right. And sugar. I also had sinus issues a couple times a year. And so I was on antibiotics, like you say, chronically. Yeah. Maybe for me, 4, 5, 6 times a year, I was on antibiotics and trying to get rid of infection. And since I've gone low carb and keto, 5 years now, and I haven't had any antibiotics in 5 years. And what it
Fantastic.
tells me
Yeah.
is it's the sugar feeds that. Now, I'm not
Oh,
going to say everybody can get away with that, but the first thing that I noticed is I didn't have UTIs anymore.
pathogens love sugar.
Right.
They love
So,
sugar. And we forget this is the big problem. So I noticed there's some quite famous people who say a lot about sugar, certain ones in the UK who happen to be chefs. But it's interesting because there's still a lot of pasta, or pasta as they call it. And the irony is that that's all breaking down to glucose in the body because it's highly refined starchy food. So
right.
and once you make that connection, and this is, I look at this cruelty of the old dieting thing. It's going to involve rice cakes or rice cap crackers, and they're this misery of dieting. Let's have just this, try and chomp our way through a lean chicken breast and steamed vegetables, and no fat and no flavor and no this, and it's rice crackers, and it's like, oh, it's miserable and deprived. There's deprivation as part of it.
Yeah.
But the irony is those rice cakes, some of them have got a glycemic index the same as sugar. You may as well just eat teaspoons of sugar. And that's horrifying because once we understand, and of course there's these competing models of, as Gary Taubes does a great talk, he delivered it and I saw it live in Australia. It's always so exciting when people come to visit us because we're sort of far away from everything, or it feels like that sometimes. And it's it was titled The Pathogenesis of Obesity, like, how does obesity come to be? And there's different theories about it, and this calories in, calories out. And he says that it's actually got inbuilt shaming built in it, because this whole sort of move more because you're slothful, eat less because you're a glutton, your behavior is shameful and not
Right.
okay. And this is what's so, and this is a really fine line we walk in terms of the health space that we're in, is just this default thing of, for people who are struggling with carrying more weight, just the shaming that can be part of what should be a medical conversation. And then the thing is, you lay on top of that of not being equipped with the tools to do things differently. And that's where low carb and keto are so different. I remember hearing about it through a neighbor who, I can't remember what sort of practitioner, but she was eating strawberries and cream for breakfast and losing weight. And I went, this is freaky. That's just crazy, because it was the low fat paradigm. Like I say, if you shout it loud enough for long enough, this becomes, this is an absolute belief system we have.
Well, and don't you find that I mean, I'm going to bring up Julie's question here.
Yeah.
She says that her doctor is concerned about the kidney and liver stress from keto, and yet her doctor, I mean, my doctor wasn't so concerned about my kidneys or my liver stress while I was vegan and I was eating high quantities of grains and who knows what, but they get all concerned that when I go keto that maybe I'll have some organ stress. But my body, with all the insulin just awash, I know that's, and I think it's because I've been in the low carb world long enough to understand that all that insulin just the pulsing through our bodies all the time isn't a healthy thing for us to deal with. And so when Julie says, but my doctor is concerned about kidneys and liver stress from keto, I kind of want to ask, well, what is it about keto that would give my kidneys and my liver stress?
Yeah, so there's two ideas of two things that are going on there. From the kidneys, part of when we break down protein, it has nitrogen, and nitrogen, is sort of a relative of ammonia, and then becomes urea and is excreted via the kidneys. So there's this idea that high protein puts stress and could potentially damage the kidneys. Now, on the flip side, what's really interesting that nobody's talking about is that when we run high blood glucose, and this is without being a diabetic, a person with diabetes has either, if they're type 1, their pancreas is not able to produce the insulin to moderate the amount of glucose. This is really what it's about, is bringing, so the human body's got really tight chemical parameters, like the pH of our blood. Like if you go outside a certain range, you're in really big trouble really quickly. Like you're looking at coma and death. And interestingly, this is actually part of metabolic ketoacidosis that people go, oh, they, orthodox trained doctors who haven't been told, apart from maybe one line. I think in my nutrition textbook, there's one line about using a ketogenic diet for treatment of epilepsy. There's one line in an enormous book. And certainly I've got a lot of medical textbooks on my shelf, and I don't know that any of the others of them mention, nutritional ketosis at all. So again, on top of that, there's that layer. But if we run high blood glucose, again, our body's got this chemical parameter of the interesting thing, our entire blood supply can probably only really hold about 1 teaspoon of glucose before it goes, this is getting out of threshold. I have to have a response to this. And the response for those of us who can make insulin is to make insulin, which then pushes the glucose out of the bloodstream, where it's actually, I think the word I use is irritating. So into the cells, where it can then be used for, when we say energy, the cell still has to convert glucose or any of the other macros into another form of energy. It's not like the cells just suck up glucose and go, yeah, let's do this. So there's a further conversion occurred inside that needs to occur inside the cell. So the analogy I use is our body's full of, all our blood vessels are pipes. And when we run high glucose a lot, these pipes have a lot of wear and tear, and it's actually endothelial micro injury. So endothelium is the inside skin within our blood vessels. And so sugar is actually, or the glucose in our blood, if it's high, is really damaging. And I guess a complication that we see so commonly is that people with poorly managed diabetes end up with very poor kidney function. So, which way do you want to take it? Do you want to have the high blood glucose and live on the rice cakes, or do you want to go keto? So I think we all have to look at risk. And I guess part of it is, I would say, well, we've got biomarkers that can test the health of my kidney function and my liver function. So let's have a look at it. And the same thing with liver is that when we are in ketosis, so I always mean to get one shipped out from the US, is the T-shirts that were got sold as a fundraiser is I get my glucose from G&G, which is gluconeogenesis. So this is why we have essential fatty acids, being omega-3s and not so much omega-6s, because we get plenty of them. We have essential amino acids, and why they're essential is our body doesn't make them. We have to take them in through our diet. So if we're low on, if our amino acid pool is running low because we don't have enough protein, then it's going to compromise all those many, many functions in the body that require amino acids. That is, like I say, the body will always pick brains before beauty. And if we have a low amino acid pool, it will say, I'm going to shunt these amino acids over to make neurotransmitters for your brain and just let your hair get a bit thin. So, brain before beauty. The brain as an organ is pretty pivotal, and it chews up a whole lot more resources than it is as a percentage of body weight. So the same thing with liver function is that there are no essential carbohydrates because we can make our own glucose. That happens in the liver. So when we ask our liver to make glucose, we're asking it to do a little bit of work. But then the flip side is if we're exposed to a high fructose diet, then that's going to predispose us, and that is a significant contributing factor to things like fatty liver disease, and that's huge. And from a medical point of view, that is called an insult. I like it. I've just got this vision of a little liver going, "I'm insulted," you know. So the insults to the liver are alcohol, being fatty, and hepatitis. So you know they're all actually eventually considered equally serious. So, you know, we can have an insult through pathogens, we can have an insult through, you know, high alcohol consumption. And eventually, so fatty liver, and it's really gross, is the version, it's like a human version of foie gras, you know. And what do they do with those geese? They stuff them full of grains. So, but fructose is so much, that's part of that localized laying down of fat around the liver as an organ. So again, I'd ask the question of like, well, we've got, you know, there is work we're asking our liver to do when we're low carb. But then the flip side is when we're higher carb, especially if those carbs are very orientated around fructose, which in the US, most of your SSBs, as we call them, sugar sweetened beverages, are fructose, you know, the high fructose corn syrup. Here in Australia, we've got a much bigger cane sugar industry, so it will be sugar that sweetens it. So that would be sucrose, which is one molecule of glucose, one molecule of fructose. So we're still getting that fructose hit. But fructose is a fascinating beast, you know, because it does things hormonally to us too. You know, it elevates our hunger hormones and it suppresses leptin, which is the hormone. It's part of this whole satiety, hunger, I guess, chemical chat that goes on in our body going, so this is adipose tissue will send out this messenger and say, hey, I've got some energy on board. You can suppress your hunger for a while because I just burn a bit of what I've got on board. So, you know, if that chemical communication is disrupted, then, you know, you can see that it's going to affect our appetite.
Yeah.
So, yeah, very intricate. But I'd basically say if a physician was saying that to me, I'd say, well, let's test it. Let's look at the biomarkers and see where the health of my liver and my kidneys is sitting, so that we can track this with time. And you'd appreciate this as a maths teacher. You know, the numbers don't lie.
Right.
They're either going to get better or they're going to get worse. And I think what we're seeing, the other thing also is that, you know, as per, you know, our community, there's a growing number of physicians who themselves are familiar with low carb and keto. And it's sort of scary because it's so different when you're new to it. Sort of like this fat, you know, again, just that fat phobic messaging that we've been hearing since the 1980s. That's
Right.
40 years now. So, and that's,
I was going to say, you've been hearing it for 40 years, but I've been hearing it for a lot longer.
yeah. Well, that's when it really got implemented into dietary guidelines. And that's when the food manufacturing industry went, oh, if our product is going to be perceived as within the guidelines, then we're going to have to play by these rules. And of course, you take the fat out of food, and the palatability of it is very much reduced. So it's like, what do we do now? It's like, oh, sugar makes it taste better. So let's add sugar to salad dressing. It's sort of like
everything, right? So, Jill, thank you so much. So ladies and everybody who's listening, I just want you to know, wow, we can always talk. Jill and I have plenty to say to each other and to you. I'm putting her email address down below. You'll see it scrolling.
Look at that. Jillian. I feel like I'm on the news.
You are. Jillian at lipedema-simplified.org. And so make sure if you want to reach out to Jill that you just, you know, throw her an email. Also, we do want you to know that we have a wonderful event coming up. Please make sure that you save the date of October. Let me find that real quick. October 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. Jill's going to have, she'll be part of our Coaches Corners. that we'll be doing over that weekend. We have a 3-day virtual event, and be watching your email for that, for you to sign up. But here's the thing. Before the 3-day event, we have this wonderful thing. I know I'm throwing stuff up here. I'm not throwing stuff up. I'm putting stuff up here. Before that, between now and our big 3-day event, we are offering a 4 webinar series. So we're adding a series with 4 webinars, and let's see if I can find that one right here. Look at that huge, boy, that's just way too big, right? So I need to put that in the chat for our free webinar series. There's going to be 4 of those. I will put those in the comments so that you can click on that. And if you need to, you can always reach out to one of us here at Lipedema Simplified, and we'll get you a link to register for those. Let me get, that's a really long banner. Let me take that off of there. It's way too long. But let me see if there's, we've had several people, and look at that. I've got 7 hearts or thumbs ups. And so if you're still on, throw us another heart or 2, give us a thumbs up. Make sure that you subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Make sure that you sign up for our free webinars and save the date, October 21st, 22nd, and 23rd for our 3-day event. It has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. Since I had 7 o'clock Eastern on one thing and 7:30 Eastern on another, I'm grateful for those of you who hung out with us all this time. This is going to be happening every Tuesday. Except for the 4th Tuesday, we're going to be holding it in the morning. And so next Tuesday morning, I believe is the 4th Tuesday of the month. Next Tuesday morning, Dr. Carlos Zumárraga and I will be meeting with you. I'm going to say 9 o'clock Eastern, AM Eastern, but be watching your email. Make sure that I've got the time right. And we are going to close up. Jill, is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
Just thank you, everyone. Thank you, Gail. Thank you. I see quite a few familiar faces. The one that's visible, Juanetta, Karen. Yeah, it's great. And I love this community, and it means so much. And we're all learning together. And the science isn't settled yet, I think. We see that in the lipedema space. There's so much room for research and new learning to come through. And that's we're at an exciting time where it's all just happening.
Yeah, it really, really is. So I look forward to seeing all of you guys. Remember that Leslyn has her Thursday this week. She's going to do her Thursday's review of a paper, research review. And then we'll see you on Friday, the 4 of us, Siobhan, Leslyn, Catherine, and I. And then Catherine will see you on Sunday, and I'll see you again on Tuesday. You can't ever get rid of us. We're like a bad penny, but we just keep on showing up. So with that, I'm going to say good night, good afternoon.
And good morning.
Good morning, good day, and I will talk to you again soon. Jill, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here.